Hey, this is Nick the Mining Book Guy, and today is Saturday, May 27th in the late afternoon. I've got a really special one here, big presentation on predictive discovery, which is ticker PDI on the ASX, which is the Australian Stock Exchange. If you've been following me, you may have noticed I've been looking more at Australian companies recently. Mod Resources was my last presentation. A big part of this presentation is about the general opportunities on the ASX, and so we're going to start in with that. But I've got a bunch of got some disclaimers and some important notes to start with. I'll admit that I've been struggling to put this together, so it might be a little disjointed. I'm going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at you. Keep in mind two things though. You can always scroll down, check the YouTube comments and or YouTube comment section or note section, and you'll see that I have organized to the best of my ability in a short time frame. Your ability, you can basically search through different sections of this presentation as they're labeled, so you don't have to just keep listening to me droning on. And the other thing is, I might miss some key things here because I've been trying to put this together, and I think I might still have some holes. You can always reach out to me at ceo.ca. I've actually been kind of bad about emails, but you can either write publicly right here if you sign up for ceo.ca or send me a private message. You can learn more about me over here as well. So this is ceo.ca /@miningbookguy. I just want to emphasize these points because this video is supposed to be a starting point, not an ending point. And so, again, it's on predictive discovery. I own quite a few shares that I've all bought on the market in roughly just the last month or so. Is when I got really excited about the company, even though I've known about it for over a year. My cost average is about 9.5 cents. I bought as high as 11 cents and as low as 8 cents. It's a little confusing to figure that stuff out because it's going through a consolidation right now. That's also another reason this is a timely presentation. But please keep in mind, all those shares have been bought on the market. I'm a retail investor. I can't participate in private placements, but this video also might be useful to you if you can participate in private placements. So there's a lot of reasons to be really paying attention right now, but I have no idea if the next few days is the best time to buy or if it's a few months from now. But I really feel like there's an opportunity here and maybe even more of an opportunity in the coming weeks. So that's the whole point of releasing the video this weekend, though it's a bit awkward because on Monday it's a holiday, Memorial Day in the US. It's also a holiday in the UK, but it's not a holiday in Australia or in Canada. So the markets will be open within the next couple days, and that's just something to keep in mind based on where you're at. And I know I have viewers in North America, I have viewers in the UK and Europe, and I have viewers in Australia and New Zealand, let alone other places. But just keep in mind that when I talk about predictive, I'm kind of more gauging towards people like myself being American, but really I'm hoping this is a useful presentation for people anywhere in the world. And also I want this to be a learning experience, even if you have no interest in buying predictive shares. But in this particular presentation, there's going to be a lot of complicated things. So again, that's why you can reach out to me if you're interested to learn more about stuff that I maybe misexplained or, more about my thinking on this. So just needed to get all of that out there. But otherwise, I'm really excited to talk about predictive because it's been the most exciting stock to me over the last month or two, despite having known about it. And it kind of comes back to how they've positioned themselves. Project generator strategy for new gold discoveries in West Africa. I still have to take a step back before getting into some nitty-gritty stuff. So the first step back is about a video that was coincidentally released yesterday, which is great. This is from Fabi at the Next Big Rush. Jay and Fabi sometimes have these great discussions, which you would be familiar with if you've been following my channel, but some of you I know are new, so that's why I'm presenting this. Immediately, you should subscribe to The Next Big Rush for all of Fabby's great content, but also because there's another video coming out on tips, if it's not out by the time you view this already, which I think was a nice segment to go with this on Australia. And essentially, I think there's the best opportunities in exploration, even more specifically gold or precious metals exploration, are ASX listed companies in some areas, regions of the world, like West Africa or Australia itself. So you should get something out of this video, listening to me saying the same types of things. But again, there's more on tips coming as well. And it's all comes back to something which I'm glad I rediscovered literally in the last day, because this is kind of the cornerstone of this presentation, even though it's not directly related to predictive. So this guy here is Rick Rule, Finding Bargains Down Under with Rick Rule. It's important to note that this article from the Gold Report is from 2013. I remember reading it years ago, maybe it was 2014. I also included this article in a West Africa general focused video, which you really should watch as well if you want to catch up with West Africa. There's a link in the comment section below, and also there'll be a link at the end of this video. But I am not that smart. I have to bluntly say it. I'm not that smart, but I feel like I'm really, really good at stealing ideas from other people. And really, a lot of the ideas I'm talking about, I stole directly from Rick. And I even have to add something that I haven't really shared publicly before, definitely haven't shared on my YouTube channel, is that Sprott Global is my broker. Rick runs Sprott Global. And I felt like this is a good time to mention that, because I don't know Rick at all personally. I've never spoken with Rick, but I'm definitely a follower. I like his ideas. You just start seeing Rick Rule videos and you're like, oh, this guy makes sense. But even though I know a lot of other people like and respect Rick, a lot of people don't follow the information in this article. I'm going to scroll down and look a little bit. There's a couple highlights, like the Australian exploration community is extremely competent overseas, particularly in Africa. And though I don't want to name any names, I have to admit that I get an edge from a lot of sources, but probably being a client of Sprott Global is my biggest edge in terms of knowing what's going on in Africa, even more specifically West Africa. I've never planned to try to become, quote unquote, a specialist in West Africa exploration stories, but it was articles like these and being a client at Sprott that helped me do that. Sprott has high commissions. I have decided that I would rather pay those high commissions than subscribe to any newsletters. That's something that I do, and I think it's been well worth it. This is not supposed to be a video about promoting Sprott Global, but I had to mention all this stuff together because I look back and it's always good to be, have some humility and admit that I don't have any original ideas here. And there's nothing wrong with that either, but there's no reason for me to even pretend that. And it comes down to articles like these. But also, you don't have to be a client of Sprott to read articles like these and become aware of things. And so there's some names here, and it's funny for me to go back and remember, Hummingbird Resources. I think I heard about Hummingbird when I read this article. And I don't own Hummingbird anymore, but that was interesting to me because people like Rick were like the only North Americans following this company, which is now, has gotten more interest in North America, but it's only been relatively recent. And that's only listed on the AIM exchange in London, which is also an interesting exchange to look at. But I'd say the big one here is Papillon Resources. That was actually over 100 bagger from the bottom, and it was a huge discovery. It was bought by B2 Gold. Honestly, and I pound the table on this at CEO.ca, I think it's going to be the best project going into production this entire cycle, and it is the flagship of B2 Gold. It's borderline tier one, but in terms of, regardless of what you call it, world class or tier one, it has been one of the most successful speculations for investors who got in early, whether you got in before or during the discovery. But that was back in 2010, 2011, 2012, and you needed to be aware of the ASX. And it's not just companies listed here. There's a few others. Orbis was bought with the Natugu deposit, was bought by Semifo. I'd say that's one of the next best ones after, and sorry, I forgot to mention, Fekola is the name of the deposit that Papillon Resources made the discovery of. And then one that's going on right now is Cardinal Resources, which I don't currently own, but that's in Ghana, and that's also ASX listed. So we're not reinventing the wheel here, but it's fascinating to me, really thinking about it this weekend, how all of Rick's ideas here, they actually feel fresh to me. And that's why I was so excited when I shared it with Fabi and Jay. But this has been going on for years. And perhaps the most amazing thing is that I feel pretty lonely being interested in this stuff. And that gets me excited to be able to continue to be a contrarian in ideas that were clearly expressed to the public. And I also know that there are probably plenty of other clients of Sprott who aren't as active as I am. And even though they have access to this type of knowledge, they still don't really take advantage of it. And that's what gets into this whole predictive discovery thing, because Sprott actually did participate in a recent placement. I'll get into that in a few minutes. But what I'm hoping is that something like predictive discovery fits this model of being an awesome bargain that perhaps, if we're lucky, replicates the success of Papillon Resources a few years ago. Finally, we can get into predictive a little bit. And so you should definitely check out these next two videos, or if you're only going to check one, check this one, because it's only 3 or 4 minutes. It's a great intro with Paul Roberts, who's the managing director of Predictive Discovery. This was from Cape Town in February 2017. Very importantly, I have to have a little backstory. I really like Paul. Talked to him once. I called him while he was in transit to London for the 121 Mining Investment Conference in London. This one is the 121 in Cape Town. So he's getting the word out to other parts of the world, which is great exposure for the company. But he told me that he met Rick at Cape Town. At least that's my memory. And I really, even if you don't know anything else about the company, you'll probably be impressed to know that Sprott made the investment here. But what really got me interested was that Paul does not want to dilute the company, and he was able to hold out and not allow for any warrants. I guess I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but bear with me because this all kind of goes together. This gets into the whole project generator model aspect, or prospect generator. Rick loves these, and people at Sprott do in general, and a few other names. Brent Cook, who writes Exploration Insights, he loves them. Adrian Day is kind of in that circle. You see these guys talking about these on YouTube or other interviews, but oftentimes you'll see a full 5-year warrant, which is great for people who can participate in them, which tend to be accredited investors or wealthier people. I can't do that. I'm okay with it occasionally, but it's one of the things I don't like about prospect generators. But Paul held out, and he was able to get an investment from Rick, even though there were no warrants. And I think that's great. I think that's huge because that's rare to see that. So that really got me even more interested. I already started buying shares, but it made me want to buy even more. That raise was at the equivalent today of 10 cents, and I was just buying a ton of shares once it hit 8 cents. So that's just providing you some insight. Like, as a retail investor, you have to scrounge around. You're kind of like a little mouse, fighting for scraps. And this company fits that in a lot of ways, or of being retail friendly. And if I get the timing right, I can feel like I'm getting an even better deal than the big guys like Rick. So, just kind of a side note there. But Paul clearly explains some stuff about the prospect generator model in this one. And he talks even more in this video, which was from London. Oh, and sorry, I forgot to finish part of that story. I tried calling Paul while he was in transit to London. He got back to me within 24 hours, and we had a great chat. And so I really appreciated that he got back to me. Sometimes I'm okay with management not talking to me, but because they're busy with things. But I can tell that he's hustling. And not only was he in Cape Town in South Africa and London in the UK, but he told me he was going to go on a 4-day road show, at least if my memory serves correctly, in North America. And that's great too. That actually ties in with what I'm going to discuss in a minute. But there's all these events coming together. This little company that was struggling for a while, but it's getting its act together and the momentum is building. So I'll just add, I'm going to try to regurgitate some of the things that Paul says in these interviews. I did get more information on the phone that I'm not going to share everything, but everything that I've seen relative to other companies, very positive in this respect. But I do need to make another side note and give a shout out. He's not listed here, so there's this is a little confusing, but it's worth explaining. So you see these handles here. I'm at Mining Book Guy. So there's one guy here at One for the Money. He gets a shout out. Also at Nick gets a shout out. Regardless of the influence that Sprott has had, helping me figure out, what the best plays are. I actually first heard about Predictive from at Nick. There's a different at Nick Z. They both are Australian. My name is Nick too, so that's why my handle isn't like that. So I just want to be clear, at Nick on its own, he was the first Australian I was aware of to post at CEO.ca, and he told me about Predictive over a year ago. So I do get a lot of cool ideas from him. He's worth following at CEO.ca for sure. And that's where the whole idea of tips comes in. You never know where they're going to come through. And so he gets a shout out. At Nick Z gets a shout out as being another Australian, coincidentally, who gives stuff. And at One for the Money, he is not very active on CEO.ca, but the reason I'm focusing on him here is was the only person to post in the predictive discovery room. You can see this is the room at CEO.ca. So there's almost basically nobody talking about it. And I posted something including predictive discovery along with a lot of other companies because I do think the 121 mining investment is a great place to learn about new companies, but clearly North Americans aren't paying attention. And so shout outs to the two Australian guys who are more active on Hot Copper, but I like how Paul Roberts is trying to introduce this to North America, and clearly people don't know about the company. So again, this is why I'm interested in the YouTube video now, and I think that it's going to start building momentum around the world. So those guys get shout outs, and it's if I have a basic tip for you, make more friends with people in other parts of the world, and it's never been easier to do that with the internet. So no one's talking about Predictive yet, but they will be once this video's out. Oh, side note, this YouTube is coming out on my channel, but not being posted on CEO.ca right away. So if you're listening on this weekend, keep that in mind, because I think that people who subscribe to my channel and pay attention should get a little bit of a leg up. But that's just a little experiment. So I'm going to post this on CEO.ca by the middle of the week, that in case anybody ever wonders about that. I just want to make a quick comment on the chart, though, as well. There was a spike here. I know for a fact that a newsletter in Australia, which are very rare, actually promoted this. Well, I'm 99% sure, and I actually discussed this with at Nick. He helped me realize that. But it's come down quite a bit from there. So there is awareness of this company, and there has been, discovery, but the froth has left it. So that's just, CEO.ca has these nice charts, and it's just good to see that, we're back down. This is actually not correct. I think it's at 8.5, 9 cents right now, but I'll explain why that's not correct as well. Let's see. We haven't even gotten in the PowerPoint yet, but all these things I'm mentioning to you, they're not the most fun stuff to talk about, but they're really key to why there's an opportunity here. So we're on the hot copper predictive discovery page. You can this actually doesn't make sense, and I'll explain why. It's because of the consolidation that's going on. So, we have to scroll down here. We'll get back to that in a second. The capital structure is really important because I know that there are people who just won't buy ASX non-Australians. They just won't buy companies that have over 1 billion shares, and for whatever reason, Australian companies tend to have a bloated share structure like this. This is from February 2017, but right now, after the 10-for-1 consolidation, basically going into this next week, we're going down from 1.63 billion to 163 million, and the share price won't be 1.2 Australian cents, it will be 12 cents Australian. So it's very easy to get confused here, but I need to emphasize that is happening right now. It doesn't change the market cap or the cash position or the enterprise value, but it will be confusing if you're doing research on your own and you see these numbers not matching up. This is a page you don't have to understand the details. I've had to try to wrap my head around it because I know that I've been wrong. Or I actually wanted to make this video a week ago and I didn't because consolidations take forever in Australia. It take like a full week. So it kind of started on Monday the 22nd. And again, key point, Monday, I'm not even sure that the ticker is actually going to be PDI. It might be PDIDA, which is what it is right now. So this is where maybe it's a blessing in disguise to just wait a few days, see what happens, and the ticker will turn back into PDI, just 3 letters, by Tuesday, May 30th. That's what's supposed to happen. I'm not even 100% sure about that, but this is so key because I've talked with a few people about consolidations in general, and a lot of people just expect there to be further downside when a consolidation is complete. I think it's up in the air if that's going to happen, but the reason I really want you to know about this weekend is that if there is further weakness, that is your opportunity to soak up shares. Because really, it's just a weird thing to me where newsletters promote a company that's already moving up, and then you get the FOMO thing going, fear of missing out, and you're chasing the stock up, and that's not what I want to see happen. I was very happy to buy shares, prior to the consolidation because I wasn't sure what would happen afterwards, but that's what I did. I was buying into weakness. So you may have an even better opportunity. I'm not sure. If it goes down to 7 cents or let alone 6 cents, I will be buying more shares. I'm very happy with my current ownership, but keep that in mind. I think this is a deep value situation, but because this consolidation is happening, it's hard to tell how it will turn out on the other end. And as a side note, things trade differently on the ASX. Anything that's 10 cents or below will actually trade to the 0.1 cents. So you can see like it would actually trade 8.5 cents, 8.6 cents, 8.7. But once you get to 10 cents, it will trade 10 to 10.5 to 11, 11.5. So just keep that in mind that there's some weirdness on the trading. But again, it should change to PDI soon, but this is what the current price is. The bid's 8.5 cents and the offer is 8.9 cents. So it's actually a little, I'm at a slight loss right now. You would be getting a better deal than my cost average. And one other thing important to mention, so these numbers are off by a factor of 10, but with the 163 million shares, there is a little less than 6 million in options, which are out of the money options for employees, and there's no warrants. So really good share structure, not the tightest ever, but very good. So I don't know if news is going to come, but there are opportunities for positive news. So that, again, that's why you have to gauge for yourself, do your own due diligence of whether this is worth buying into in the next few days, or if you want to wait a few weeks or even a few months to get into the company. Now we're finally getting back into into the PowerPoint, maybe a little bit more fun stuff focused on the company now. So I love the strategy, one-stop shop for investors seeking gold explorations exposure in West Africa, which is kind of the title of my PowerPoint. This is about more than Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. It's more than just that one jurisdiction. This is the only prospect generator, I think, in Africa, which is already huge. It makes it unique. But I think there's a need for that because there are many opportunities for exploring, virgin ground, greenfields exploration at this stage to try to spread the risk around for those opportunities. I really think that is the best way to go about it. And these guys are doing it right. And I'm sure that Rick is helping, or people at Sprott are helping Paul develop this. I mean, he may have decided that on his own, but I know that this company was not doing this a few years ago. So that's a real positive, to have good shareholder support, strategic shareholders, but also a strategy that fits in with what your shareholders are looking for, because we know that Sprott likes prospect generators. And so Predictive will hold about 30 to 40% of equity in a lot of these projects, but that's okay if they make that tier 1 discovery. And that's what gets me excited too. I want to be in a company before the tier 1. I don't care if they don't own 100%. So this is the right place to look for elephants. And I think the machine is churning. Like, I think they're right in the sweet spot right now. And we're scrolling down, and this is a really key slide. This is like the rainbow colors. You get, like, I think it's kind of overwhelming, but the key thing, over 6,000 square kilometers of permits in Côte d'Ivoire. That's really important. This part, I don't know if everyone would understand it, but they really do have first mover advantage here. I have to give a lot of credit to Paul for being in West Africa for at least 5 years. At least 5 years even in Ivory Coast, because it is hard to get exploration ground there, and it is hard, at this time in some of these countries to get permits to move forward, but they are making it work. I need to try my best to break this down for you in terms of value. And you can kind of see it here. Like the Toro Gold JV, this is the main value right now, but there's also Babosa JV and there's New Ground. Within the Toro JV, there's an order of interest. I'll scroll down in this other one, kind of go back and forth. So the Bundiali permit is number 1. Bundiali right here, it looks small, but this is a key area, and I'll go into some more nitty gritty later in the video if you're still sticking with me then. But I will focus a little more attention to Bundiali than to the other projects, just to give you an idea of my understanding and why this is clearly the most valuable at this point, but it might not continue to be. This little 2-kilometer section of this 6-kilometer anomaly is what's been drilled so far, and you can see some of the results here. I mean, these are very impressive results. 20 meters at 10.5 grams per ton gold, 28 meters at 4 grams per ton gold. That's near surface. Now, there was some recent results, and I have to admit this is one of, unfortunately, a bit of a weakness. These came out a week ago, and they were mediocre. They weren't able to follow up with outstanding results, and this happens a lot. You get great results on your first holes, and you can't replicate, whether you're going deeper or going along strike. So the best holes are here, and this is more, I'm not an expert here, but this is my understanding. You've got some nice mineralization in this area, but it really did get closed off to the top. There weren't results up here. There were some results here, so you do have continuity over at least a kilometer. But again, the best mineralization's here, and so far we've had pretty mixed results going deeper. So what that means is I think they've got enough. Like they're going to have some type of deposit here, and that's my guess. But is it going to be just a few 100,000, or is it going to be 500,000 or 1 million? Yeah, it's going to be tougher to reach that tier one level, but they haven't drilled here yet, and more importantly, they're drilling right now on these two other anomalies. And again, this is virgin territory. This is why Ivory Coast is great. I mean, well, it's great because so little activity has taken place, but a reason for that is because there's been a terrible civil war, and there's still some other issues with the country, but it lags behind other West African countries in terms of exploration, or at least modern exploration, but it's actually wealthier and has better infrastructure and better things going on than a lot of the bordering countries. So there's some good and bad in that aspect, but the good for sure is that this is very prospective land, and we will see. This is to be determined, but this is easily the most valuable of the properties at the moment. I should go quickly to the Toro JV page. You have to know what Toro is. Toro Gold is a private company that is developing a gold project in Senegal. It actually seems like a pretty nice project. And even though they're private, they have a PowerPoint. And the thing is, it's very possible there's a bit of a discount because people don't know who Toro is. But this is part of the PowerPoint. And right in the middle of it, it's very clear that Côte d'Ivoire exploration is a key aspect, for their growth. And it wouldn't surprise me if Toro goes public at some point or becomes, an emerging mid-tier. But what I want to emphasize here is one of the main weaknesses of the company. Predictive had to do an earn-in, kind of at the bottom of the market, and so it was very favorable to Toro. Toro could earn up to 90%. They're not going to be, because of Predictive's choice to participate in funding. What has happened is that we've gotten through 2 stages, and so $3.5 million US dollars were spent for Toro to earn 65% in all of these projects. And Bundiali is the one we were just discussing. There are these other 2 I'll discuss briefly. This one's a little behind, but these other 2 are very interesting. But basically, from here on out, Predictive is going to be spending 35% of the drilling costs as they, or exploration costs as they move those forward. And so the good part is I think Toro's, a good partner, and they're spending a lot of money. Like they've made discoveries. Actually, that's excellent that they've been able to do so much on 3.5 million USD, because they're on to a discovery down here as well. But the back end of the deal means Predictive does have to spend more money. Talking about earn-ins is fascinating because you have a whole wide range. I'll just say that even though you can see more favorable earn-ins with other companies, oftentimes a lot less work will get done. So I like the relationship between Predictive and Toro, and I do expect this to continue in a positive manner. Need to go back and Bira Bukru and Kukumbo. These are definitely the number 2 most interesting because they're right next to Bonikro. And Bonikro is a nice producing deposit for Newcrest, which is the equivalent of Barrick for Australia. And so this is an example where if they don't make the tier 1 discovery, I think it would immediately be interesting to Newcrest if they, had anything of value. So just Bundiali and these land packages, I mean, these are great. Like this is prime location, and this there's been a little bit of drilling, but there should be a lot more coming, and at least something by the end of the year. And then you have the Ferka Sedugu and Ferka Sedugu North, which are, excuse me, it gets confusing, but I have all these tabs open to try to make it easier, but sometimes it doesn't work out. There are some nice anomalies for both of these, and it's hard to fully understand, but these are impressive anomalies. And keep in mind, it's hard to find deposits where you, just by doing geochemistry and getting these soil samples actually gets you drill targets. Like a lot of drilling has to be done blind, or with geophysics instead of geochemistry, because all the good stuff has been found in other parts of the world. But this is, I keep emphasizing, Ivory Coast has excellent virgin ground. This is a huge anomaly, but I think they have to tighten it up. But all of this stuff is part of the Toro JV, and so there's a lot of opportunities here. And again, they don't have to spend 100%, but we don't. There could one of these targets might fail, but another one will surprise and could be that tier 1 discovery. But now we're talking about Boboso, and Boboso are these red ones right here. So this is an entirely different JV, and it's with Progress Minerals, another private company, which might be a bit more interesting to the Canadians because it's run by some Canadians. I'll actually click on here, see if this comes up. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I think some people will know these names. I actually know Doug Reddy the best. I think I spoke to him once. He used to be with Endeavor Mining. So anyway, these guys are clearly trying to get into the Ivory Coast. And even though they're not a well-known name, they are spending 1 million USD right now, and Predictive will be able to maintain 30%. I don't like this target as much as the Toro JV targets, but again, you don't know where the discovery is going to come in, and we should get news on that in the next few months as well. So that's definitely a positive, that they're able to get someone else to spend money to potentially make, well, there's been gold found, but they're trying to show continuity and then, hopefully increase or get a real resource there. But now we're going to talk about Burkina Faso briefly. I need a sip of water. And in Burkina Faso, they actually have a very developed project or advanced project, the Bungu discovery. And this goes back to another reason I like the company a lot better now than where it used to be. I think they actually went through a lot of dilution to try to grow this when it might not have been the best call, because this is a nice small deposit, just under 200,000 ounces and relatively high grade, 2 or 3 grams per ton. But this is not going to be tier 1. At the same time, this is clear value already created. There are some permitting issues in Burkina, just like there are some issues, or at least government bureaucracy type issues. To the credit of Predictive, they've been able to advance everything in Ivory Coast so well. But I know other companies having issues in Burkina as well. Well, I think it's just a matter of signing some papers. But once that happens, there's a JV that's lined up, and I think value will immediately be unlocked because that JV can spend money to further increase the size of this deposit, and hopefully Predictive can make some nice money on it. I would guess that it's worth at least 5 million Australian dollars, as is. So this is some nice icing on the cake, and it also emphasizes that there's more going on here than just the Ivory Coast. There is a possibility for further exploration on other Burkina properties and other parts of West Africa. So I just love that whole mix, that they're kind of de-risked as a prospect generator, both by minimizing dilution now, having other people spend money on these projects, but also by being in multiple jurisdictions where it's just really hard to tell who's really going to be the winners and losers in West Africa. But I personally like Ivory Coast the best, and I'm glad, happy to say that Predictive is a clear leader there. So to kind of finish off, I think this finishes off the PowerPoint. There's a lot going on, and I guess I have to give a shout out to one of my other companies that I really have had a lot of success with, which is Mondoro Capital. I have a video on Mondoro that you can find, in my YouTube section. But Mondoro, to me, is the best example of a company that's doing everything right after struggling for a few years, and they just have so many catalysts. And Predictive, for me, is right behind it. And even though Mondoro is not a prospect generator, or at least they don't position themselves as one, both of these companies have multiple projects that are drilling in kind of a stacked way. So like here you can see, Bundiali is getting drilled right now, but it's Kukumbo and Birabukuru. Those are going to get drilled soon, and also the Ferkasudugu property. So those are all part of Toro, and those are going to get drilled soon. But then Babosa is getting drilled, and then Bungu is going to have something, and then you have these new properties as well, which are all these pink and green ones, which haven't even been JV'd out yet. Oh, despite me saying one of the few negatives I see with the company being somewhat unfavorable JVs like the Toro JV in terms of forcing Predictive to spend on the back end, it's very possible that as they advance these new properties, they will get much more favorable JVs in an upmarket and after having established themselves. So I love it that they have advanced projects and they have these new projects and they're just going to keep getting more land and they have all the catalysts. Hopefully I've gotten you excited about this because even if you never buy shares in this company, it's totally worth following. They made a discovery last year and North Americans just had no idea it was even happening. I see people complaining on CEO.ca all the time, like, where are the discoveries? Well, they're happening in ASX companies, and Predictive is bar none the number one, junior exploration story in West Africa. There's others I follow, there's others I've mentioned, but for pure greenfields, early stage, under 20 million market cap, this is the one. And so I have a lot more to say about some other stuff, but I'd say that I've given you enough information to at least do your own due diligence further, do more research, and you've got some stuff to work with. I guess to end this section, I will mention that, my cost average is about 9.5 cents. I would say anything under 12 cents is great value. I mean, especially under like 10 cents. And we're talking with the enterprise value being 15 million or 20 million. I guess once you get to 25 or 30 million enterprise value, that's where I would say we're getting closer to fairly valued. That's not including any of the discovery potential. And that's the thing, is that you could say a company like this is undervalued based on what they already have, but then because they have all these catalysts and all this exploration potential, it could immediately re-rate further. So you get the best of both worlds, and there is that tier 1 gold discovery potential. So I'd say that in an ideal world, this video and my buying and other people buying on the market would help get this stock price up to something like 15 cents. And then they could do another raise at 15 cents, and I would be ecstatic, if that happened later this year. So we'll see if that happens. But that's, I'm just giving you a window into what I'm trying to do here, and like I know they're going to need more money at some point, but I do feel this is very undervalued right now, and I can talk more about those details with you at CEO.ca if you reach out to me. But now I've got a second part of the video, and this is going to get really long. It already is pretty long, but this is getting more into, the people who are like me and they want to dig into all the little details and find all the, the nooks and crannies. So hopefully a few of you want to, are still watching and you want to take advantage of some of these other interesting resources I've gathered. So this is something that some more likely that the Canadians have seen. This is a video, again, you scroll down into the YouTube notes section and you can see the link. Rick was on BNN and he talked about, 3 of his top companies. And I'm not going to, you play this for yourself. It's very short. But he mentioned Alphamin, which is in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mineral Sands, which I think is in Australia on the ASX, and Cornerstone, which is in Ecuador. And it's funny how there are 3 different commodities, tin, mineral sands, and gold and copper. That's 3 different jurisdictions. All of them are tier 1 or tier 1 potential. So Rick really likes the tier 1 stuff, and you could also say that they all have quirks about them. Like Alphamin is in a scary jurisdiction, and honestly, as an opinion, I don't like the Democratic Republic of Congo close to as much as Ivory Coast. But you could say that they're both not as good jurisdictions as other places. But that's just I just wanted to throw my opinion out there that like that's something where Rick, I think, is is more open to that than or likes that jurisdiction better than I do, but it still can be considered a tier 1 asset. Mineral sands is a good example, I think, of an ASX listed company like we were talking about. Maybe it's undervalued because of both being on the ASX and in Australia, and also being a commodity that a lot of people don't understand. Cornerstone is one it gets a lot of talk on co.ca, and I'll give another shout out to Pamplona Trader, because he has totally nailed that one in terms of extracting further value. But it is useful to think about Cornerstone in relation to predictive discovery, because Cornerstone is also a prospect generator that just happens to be far more advanced, and I think they did have a better deal with SolGold. But I wanted to touch more on not really Cornerstone, but about Ecuador in general. And this is the stuff I really think a lot about. The Northern Miner had this article that was completely focused on Ecuador and 10 active companies. And if you look at the first two listed ones, Orania and Cornerstone. So, Cornerstone, it's done great. And I don't own any shares, but, more power to the people that have made a ton of money. I wish I got in really early. It's not at the stage where I'm as interested. Orania is one I'm going to pick on. And there's things I love about it, but then there's other things which are exactly the reasons I look for the predictive discoveries over the Oranias. And so it's a little bit apples and oranges, but I think this is really worth thinking about if you want to be like me and start looking at these little juniors. The thing about Orania is that there's a lot of cachet behind it. Not only, well, let's check this out. So not only do you have a guy named Dr. Keith Barron, who made probably the best discovery of the last cycle in the gold space, which was Fruta del Norte in Ecuador. So he has experience there. That's the closest thing, I think, to a tier 1 discovery. At least, I think a lot of people consider that a tier 1 discovery, and it was a huge moneymaker on the TSXV. So he's got all this cachet, but he's back in Ecuador, and he's doing, it's just funny, because I go to the website, and you don't even see the company. You see the Lost Cities project. And so it's definitely beyond just a junior. They've got the whole story. I have to give a shout out to my buddy at Newton, Peter Bell on Twitter. He still does these excellent interviews. And so even though I'm picking on Orania, this was an excellent interview by Newton. I learned a lot from it. And it adds to the story. Things like this is really long. I recommend reading it. But you go through the whole thing, and you go to the website, and the thing is, this is story. Now there is historical reasons for interest here, but there hasn't been any drilling, let alone stuff that's been done is hundreds of years old. So it's not even really true greenfields in a way. And the market cap's over 50 million right now. And some of that's cash, but still the enterprise value is well over 40 million. And again, I'm thinking a lot about this because, why doesn't a country like Ivory Coast have stuff like this going on? Obviously Predictive does not get a 40 million market cap without, Predictive, the enterprise value is, just a slightly over 10 million Australian. And they've actually made discoveries and advanced things. And so you see these, relative valuation gaps all the time. But Orania is an interesting one because they've really nailed the story. And who knows, maybe it will be worth it. Maybe this will turn into hundreds of millions, if not billion-dollar value. But it's the perfect example of something I would never put money into. I just can't do it. I can't put my money into froth like this. And so there's a dichotomy in the sense that, I would always take the predictives, where when I was giving you the valuations before, I wasn't even including a premium for management, even though I know that Paul Roberts is a solid guy, and I know that's a solid team, but they don't have the cachet and mystique that a Keith Barron has in Ecuador. But even though there's that gap, really, I want to emphasize this. I think Ivory Coast beats out Ecuador in a lot of ways as a jurisdiction. Ecuador has proven discoveries. It has an exciting thing with Soul Gold and Cornerstone right now, but it also has a lack of infrastructure. It has a lot of difficult roadways and jungles, and a lot of these deposits are at high altitudes in the middle of nowhere. And the thing is, Ivory Coast has great infrastructure in a lot of parts of it, and not only are there proven deposits, there's a lot of majors there. And so I'm trying to do my best to create the Ivory Coast, story here, get that going. But you don't really need to hear it just from me. I think listening to someone like Mark Bristow at Randgold is great. And I don't know why North Americans don't listen to him too much. A lot of people respect Randgold, but listen in here for just a minute. I'll play this. This is from the Denver Gold Forum last fall.
Below pit drilling. The big project, which is the one I refer to, or you referred to, I refer to, which is a nice big one, because 3 million ounces is our minimum hurdle rate, but it's not our ambition. We believe to make real money, you've got to be much bigger than 3 million ounces. And really right now, everything's pointing to the Ivory Coast for that target. And in particular, the Bondiali Belt, where we've now defined about a 15-kilometer continuous mineralization on an intra-greenstone belt structure, which is the ones that are always better metallurgically than the belt margin structures. And I just and certainly Fonandara, which we've announced, has got resources a half-kilometer target, but it's not necessarily the best in that belt, in that extension. And what?
So I think you've heard enough for now. So again, if you're like me and you love finding the nuggets information, this is one of the more valuable links that I'm sharing here. Listen to this whole thing. He says more about Ivory Coast. There's nothing really new here, but I don't think people realize, like, even though Mark is in the Democratic Republic of Congo, he's in Mali, he's in the Ivory Coast, he by all measures, he likes Ivory Coast the best, and he's in Senegal as well. But Ivory Coast is where he's looking for the next elephant, and he is the champion, but for whatever reason, you're not getting North American retail to listen to him. But of course, there are some people out there listening to him. I presented this in a previous video on Orca Gold, which might interest you. Maybe I'll have a link at the end of this video. Well, you can find it. But this is really valuable because it shows two things. It shows Randgold's current permits, and man, I'm telling you, this is like super valuable info if you can kind of piece it together like I have. But Bondiali for Predictive, I think it's right here. There are other. This ties in. So like Randgold is basically a senior. The weird thing in Ivory Coast is that you have a lot of seniors that are doing tons of exploration, but this area, like so Tongan is a huge mine. I mean, that's a great mine they have. But I think what Mark's saying in that video is this trend. This is where the elephants are hiding, and so their Predictive's right here. And I have to mention a few of the other players. Apollo Consolidated, which I don't really want to discuss too much because I may buy more shares in the future. I like them a lot as well, and they have some interesting exploration. They're also an ASX company. It's AOP on the ASX, but I don't think management. I think there are some questions on management. I do need to call them, but I've heard through the grapevine, possibly mediocre, some red flags, and I'm always careful with management where it's not at least like a B level, using the US grading system, but it could be like a C or a D or gets in the scary area. They have stuff in Ivory Coast and Australia, so they're not as focused in West Africa as Predictive. I like Predictive better, but they are right here as well. And then Orca has something interesting right here as well. So I can already envision this is going to become some This is where it's at. This might be where it's at for all of West Africa. I'll have more to say on that. But also notice all these other little things. These are, I believe, some JVs between Randgold and it might not be this, but this is another important news release. Randgold and Newcrest join forces to expand exploration in Côte d'Ivoire. And this quote: "The bigger the footprint, the greater the opportunity, potential for the discovery of truly world-class deposits." Now, the point I'm trying to make is, even though this is the prime area right now in Ivory Coast, it's a big country, and I think this whole other area is where Newcrest and Randgold are going to be doing work together. And don't forget, like you can see Bonikro and Agbao down here. Don't forget that Predictive is right here as well. Predictive's got stuff like all over the place. So I'm kind of selling you on, Ivory Coast has so much going on, but there's so much more to discover, and there just aren't that many juniors there. And so Predictive is head to head with these big guys, and if Predictive makes a big discovery, there's going to get a lot of phone calls immediately. As a side note, Newcrest is also in Ecuador, so good on Newcrest to be in, have some interesting stuff going on. I mean, they have an interest in Soul Gold, and they're doing all this stuff in Ivory Coast, so they're doing it right. They're in the right areas. This is from the West African gold video that I created a little over a year ago, and I can't find this PowerPoint anymore, but I actually like this image a lot because it shows the cluster. So I'm just, again, this is the stuff where you want to really get into it like I do. You start staring at this long enough, and you stare at all these different maps, and you start to realize where the real value is. So here, this just was a great image to me. This is from a Goldfields PowerPoint, where this is like the whole Birimian Greenstone Belt, and for whatever reason, Ivory Coast, besides this little area and up here, is like blank. And I really think that this area could turn into, the Kiniebe Inlier. Sorry, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but the Senegal-Mali fault zone. This is where tens of millions of ounces have been discovered, and it's the sweet spot for Randgold. Randgold wants to make another one of these over here, and then of course Ghana, like this goes way back, like Ghana's got stuff. So this was an especially interesting PowerPoint to show these clusters. And I love Burkina Faso, but you don't have the elephant deposits in Burkina that you have over here, and so I really, again, like, there's something special about Ivory Coast in terms of the potential, but also that we could be hitting on it in the next year or two. Like, this could be the sweet spot for the entire world for elephant gold discoveries. I'm really emphasizing that. I just wanted to point this out because this was another player. This is Mariana Resources. This was an image of their early stage exploration properties, but they're kind of frozen now because Mariana got bought by, or at least Sandstorm proposed an acquisition for the Hot Maden project in Turkey. And I know that a lot of people in Canada were excited about Mariana and even intrigued by their Côte d'Ivoire properties. But keep in mind, they were over in the corner. They didn't have the wide breadth. I mean, they could have been interesting, but basically, this is going to be on hold until possibly a spinoff occurs. And so I'm mentioning this for people who are getting intrigued in Ivory Coast, because they own Mariana. The only other TSXV listed gold-focused Ivory Coast exploration junior was Orca Gold. And I love Orca. And I mean, anybody who's heard me talk about that or seen my other videos, I have more Orca videos than anything else. But, kind of talking about Orca and Mariana in tandem. Mariana, is kind of off the table for Ivory Coast. I spoke to Hugh Stewart recently at Orca, and I love what they're doing in Sudan, but really Sudan is the main focus right now. And they have an advanced deposit in Sudan, which has, nothing to do with West Africa. And the Ivory Coast stuff, they're kind of, maybe a little bit frustrated, but they're kind of in the same boat as a lot of other people, waiting for some permits or waiting for some government bureaucracy. So Orca is really exciting to me. It's one of my favorite plays for this whole cycle. but I don't really expect much activity until, or great news flow until the end of this year at the earliest, if not 2018. So I used to think of Orca in terms of Ivory Coast as being the premier company, and different from Predictive. Orca owns 100% of their projects, or there's some royalties with Kinross, but they were drilling them on their own. But despite Predictive being a prospect generator, Predictive's doing stuff right now. So if you are like me and you're kind of impatient and you want that exposure to Ivory Coast drilling right now, we're just going back to, Predictive's your number one. Apollo was that one I mentioned before. It's kind of intriguing, but for people who are in Canada or the US and they haven't looked at the ASX, but they're interested in Ivory Coast, all roads keep leading back to Predictive. So here's one of these things. I almost don't want to tell everybody about it, but you're still watching. This is just so interesting to me that Centamin, just as an example of kind of an emerging mid-tier, their main deposit, which I think is definitely world-class, if not tier one, is in Egypt. But look at all the stuff they're doing in West Africa. I couldn't believe all this land that they're picking up. So I knew about this, and a lot of people actually don't, that they are creating a district-scale land package on the Burkina Faso and Ivory Coast border, and they're making progress here. But they just are picking up all this new stuff, and you can see this is actually not very far from, it's on Bundiali trend. And so not only they pick all this up, but there's a ton of money. 2017, 12 million US, that's a lot going into Ivory Coast, and money going to Burkina. So it just goes to show Predictive's in the right area. I mean, who knows? Sentiment's might be interested in some of these smaller companies like Predictive, and I'm only emphasizing Sentiment because this is info that a lot of experts aren't following. Like, this is a big deal. But the things that people are following that I haven't mentioned, I mentioned Randgold, but Perseus Mining and Endeavor. And by the way, Endeavor has IDI, which is a real focus for them. Perseus has Yaouré, and it has Sisingwe, which I think is up here. And then, there's a lot of mines, there's a lot of development projects, and there's a ton of exploration going on, but there's only a few juniors, and Predictive is really well placed right now. And then now, maybe the most valuable, in my opinion, and this is a shout out to the hot copper people, and I'm sure I'll start communicating a little more, but this guy Eshman, he's someone I followed for a while. Unfortunately, I don't see him posting on Hot Copper, I think, at all anymore. I think he might have been banned or at least frozen, which is unfortunate because I believe he's an experienced geologist. I've never talked with him, but this is really cool because this gets into like, whoa, this is why geology and mining and stuff is so neat because we understand so little about the Earth. We're talking Pangea here, like this is where West Africa and South America meet, and so a lot of companies, and this is from Alicanto, which is another holding of mine, which I'll talk a little more in a second. The greenstone belts in both these areas have a lot of similarities, and maybe not everyone believes this, but whether you're looking at gold or you're looking at oil, it's not a coincidence at all that you see similarities on both sides. But what Eshman did was something very simple. He added this little trend line here, and I just think this is so cool. Some of the biggest elephant deposits that were discovered here were actually in Venezuela, and of course no one would touch Venezuela now, but that at a time, 20 years ago, Venezuela was where it was at. Like that was a great place to do discoveries. But you start going on this trend and you start seeing gaps. And actually, I love Alicanto. That this is from, I own a lot of shares in Alicanto, and I would say that Alicanto and Predictive are neck and neck for me for, in terms of interest right now. But I do trust Predictive more on keeping the news flow going. I hope Alicanto gets better news flow, but they've been a little more frustrating. But Guyana is interesting right now. Suriname is definitely interesting, and French Guiana, there hasn't been much. But this is the area where you don't see much of anything at all. And actually, let me go back here. Eshman added in a great comment as well. He even mentioned, on this map, they didn't include Duby and Tuzan, and they didn't include IDI. So we're going to go back. Duby was really interesting to me. That's right here in Liberia. That was, Hummingbird's deposit that's kind of been sidelined a bit, but it still has growth potential. I think it's a 4 million ounce deposit. And then you get here, and IDI is neck and neck as the flagship for Endeavour Mining, along with the Houndé project in Burkina. But basically, those are two projects right here, and there's all this other stuff in Ivory Coast. So what I'm trying to show you here is that this is, some theoretical evidence that there could be more elephant deposits right here to rival what you've already seen in like Venezuela and all these other ones, and maybe the same rival as what's up in Mali. And it's just another way of looking at some of the things we already looked at. Let's go back to, yeah. So I mean, that line is the equivalent to kind of going down this way. So don't be surprised if over the next few years, the next big elephant deposit is somewhere along here in Ivory Coast. And by the way, I do still like Liberia. I think it's very prospective, but unfortunately, Liberia is not a good jurisdiction right now. See, this gets into the whole, which countries are getting better and worse. I think Liberia has a lot more hurdles than the Ivory Coast at the moment. And that's why I'm focusing so much more of my attention in Ivory Coast than Liberia. But to Eshman's little map, Liberia still has tons of potential as well. So you always want to keep your eye on all these different countries in West Africa. And this is just an example of something I like to add. I've shown this to people before, but this is the Ivory Coast room at CEO.ca. And I'm, shout out again to @Excelsior, who's one of the few other people who likes posting on West African stuff. And he's posted in here a little bit as well. But I posted some things on, soldier mutiny in Ivory Coast. And this is one of those things where it was resolved, but it's going to be lingering. I really think that this is where someone like me can get a leg up on the mining specialists. And I think you can too. If you want to get into the research like I do, like you can read all this stuff I posted and start searching it for it yourself for other countries. But I really like to try to figure out, what are the risks in each of these countries, and can I gauge whether something that happens, whether it's like Ebola or a terrorist attack or a coup d'etat or a mutiny, where these are all happening, but how much are they real risks to a country? And I just need to emphasize that, comparing Ivory Coast to Ecuador, I still think Ivory Coast is a better place. So that's debatable, but those are, they should be in tandem. But I know for a fact that a lot of people like Ecuador better than Ivory Coast, and I don't think it's deserved. I also think that Ivory Coast will continue to have excellent foreign direct investment. And so even though, unfortunately, you can see domestic issues, it doesn't affect the investment. I think they need gold production to replace cocoa production, especially because cocoa prices have gone down quite a bit relative to gold. And also, their president's going to be in office until at least 2020. And, there's always, corruption type issues across the board. But I think there's going to be a very good chance for stability for at least another few years. And that, as speculators, is what we're looking for. So I just wanted to, add, there's a lot more you can look at for your own due diligence, your own research. And hopefully, for the people who've stuck with me in this video, some of these extra resources are helping you piece together things specifically for predictive discovery in Ivory Coast, but also more generally for West Africa, and you can apply it to other parts of the world. I think that's it. This is probably going to end up being my longest video, maybe my longest ever, but I hope to look back at this in a year or two from now, and even if predictive doesn't work out, I hope to see that other people got something out of this. I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with this company, a lot of interesting stuff going on in this jurisdiction. And, again, just a general shout out to Rick Rule, because I don't think I would have ever gotten as excited about this industry if I didn't start following Rick Rule YouTubes and podcasts. And I know that he helps out a lot of young people. And so, even though I'm a client of Sprott Globals, it's kind of just like, I'm just glad to have discovered this area, and all the content in this video I don't think would have ever been created if I didn't have, some type of connection with Sprott, and which eventually led me to doing my own research. But, kind of as a final note, it's not like anybody just gets spoon-fed ideas. There's a lot of work I did to put into this. I get tips from a lot of places, as you should as well. It's about timing things right, buying at the bottom, selling at the top, and putting all these complex factors together. And for companies I follow right now, I think predictive discovery incorporates more of these factors than anything else. Being on a different exchange, being in a scary part, or a part of the world that's underdeveloped but perceived as scary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I hope you got some value out of this, and please do reach out to me on ceo.ca if you have any follow-up questions, at miningbookguy@co.ca. So again, this is Nick, the Mining Book Guy. Hope you enjoyed. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.